Now we'll open up to a time of questions and answers. Please, if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. Please keep your questions to about 30 seconds so that we give the speakers the chance to fully answer the questions. All right. Technical, if you can please help highlight both of our speakers while we go into a time of questions and answers. To kick things off, we'll start off with our Deacon Demi. Um, I know towards the end of your presentation, you talked about different ways people can go about investing, different avenues, your recommendations. There wasn't so much time to dive into that, so maybe you could say a bit more. The question is, what is your recommendation for someone who has never invested before? And how would you go about maybe if you had $100 to invest, you're a first-time investor, or you had a lump sum of $5,000 to invest?
Yes, I'll try and quickly answer that. And again, every situation is different, so you really have to think about, your risk appetite. You have to think about your time horizon, tax, all of these different things. Um, and of course, this is not financial advice. Like it's so important to always like disclaim that. But I think I would take the example of $100, right? Because my brother he just started working, and I wanted him to get started investing because investing is something that compounds over time. So if you start investing at 22, and even if you invested just $100 a week, by the time you're 40, 60, and whatever, that amount does multiply, over time. So well, this is more of like what I do right now, right? Just based on what I understand about investing to date. I think the easiest thing to invest in is probably going to be stocks. Like I think those are probably the easiest, most accessible thing, for most people because one, it's a little bit easier to understand. Two, there's a lot of information. So any stock, they need to provide information publicly to investors. And so you actually have some opportunity to do some research into the stocks because those companies have to make information available to anyone that wants to invest in them. So, my personal tip for investing, which again is not advice, but it's just something that I do today, is one, I don't always know when to invest, right? So because I've been investing for a long time, I have certain companies I like to invest in. So I know what to invest in, but I don't always know when to invest in a particular company because stocks go up and down. For somebody that's just starting, they may not even know what to invest in. So they're still trying to figure out that what. So for the what to invest in, I would say to get started, I would start with ETFs, right? And one of the most popular ETFs is the S&P 500 ETF. And the S&P 500 is basically a list of the 500 largest companies, on the stock market. And you can buy all of those 500 companies um, in one stock, essentially. And so I would probably start with that, right? I think that's the easiest way to just get a feel for what it's like to invest and how do these, things trade up and down. So my first tip would be to look for something like an ETF that aggregates multiple stocks, right, into one. So that way you're getting past the question of what to invest in because now you're getting access to everything. Um, so hopefully that answers that question of what do I invest in? I would go with an ETF that aggregates multiple stocks. Now the second question, when to invest? Um, I don't know when to invest. That's just the truth. No one really knows when to invest in a stock, right? And so what I do because I still want to invest frequently, but I don't know when, right? And I don't want to go put $1,000 into the market because I might just lose that $1,000 may decline. So what I do is instead of investing $1,000 or whatever the lump sum is for you, I take a small portion of that amount. So, let's say I want to invest $500 every week. I take $500 every week. So, there are 5 days in a week. So maybe I'll invest $100 a week, a day, every single day. And there's in Robinhood, this was one of the questions I asked us to look into. In Robinhood, for example, there's a way to set up a recurring investment. So now every single day I can buy $5, $10, $100, whatever the number is of the S&P 500. So now I've eliminated the second question of when to invest. I don't think about when to invest because every day I'm investing and I've gotten past that hump of how do I get, myself initially started. So hope so. These are just, again, tips to get started. Of course, as you get more sophisticated, you might start to do, more opportunistic things. But, if you're just getting started, I would say your first question is always going to be, what can I invest in? And I think the easiest way to get started is, with one of these ETFs. And then the second question is when to invest. And I think you can get started today by setting up a small recurring investment. And that way you get yourself going. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much.
I just want to add something from a layman's perspective. For a person who has not invested before and wants to invest, or who has hardly done any investment, my layman's approach would be there are always individuals who are very uh, involved in those kind of things. They talk it, they breathe it, they do it. So asking for the advice helps. And initially, when you are starting, you start with small money and understand that sometimes it's not a quick fix. I invest, I get the return, otherwise I sell, and so on. So you take advice from them, take the initial risk, and keep talking to them and their likes, and your body of knowledge will be building. And one of the things in the presentation is this time element. That is, if you are 24 or 31, you can always do some investments like, oh, I've thrown this money away buying, McDonald's, and I don't remember them again. So those kind of investments, they accumulate over time because they are monies you won't bother about. So, that's my layman's advice. Try to get advice from those who know, trust their judgment until you get to a point where you are able to make independent decision yourself. Don't let it keep you away from investment if you are so minded.
Right. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Dick and Demi. So for people
Maybe I'll
wondering,
actually add one more thing, because the other question is how much can I invest, right, as well. And I did go through this exercise again with my brother who's just starting work. And this is where your budgeting comes in. Once you think about how much you make a month and rent and food and all the other expenses, then you may have some leftover, right? And that becomes the amount that you can invest in. So if you're thinking of how much can I invest, look at your budget and see what's left after like your main expenses. And then that can give you like a starting point of how much to invest. So hopefully that's helpful as well too.
all right, thank you. So to summarize, for those who have no experience with investment and want to get started, you can do so by downloading an app called Robinhood. That's an investment vehicle. You can also use the Cash App. You can Google other investment platforms. And then Dick and Demi mentioned investing, setting up recurring investments, and Pastor mentioned talking to people who are skilled at this to get some more information. Thank you all. Pastor, you talked about divine repositioning. You talked about how before, you pray for a blessing and before you receive that, God would prepare you to be able to receive what's coming. For example, before the Bible talks about he who finds a wife, and the man is not finding a woman or finding a girl, but finding a woman that has already been prepared to be a wife, right? So I'd love if you could share with us an example of a time in your life when you experienced divine repositioning.
Okay, I will take from the illustration you gave on, God has to be working in us before he can be a work through us. When I finished high school, I used to be very, very smart. I'm not saying I'm stupid now, but I used to be very, very good. But that was in Nigeria, and expected everyone expected me to go straight into college, but my results of the exams I did were withheld. They called it pending then, and I had to stay at home for 1 year, right? And all my friends had gone to school. But it was in that year that, in that year they didn't get a house help in my house. So I was automatically the house help. I did all the laundries, all my friends were talking of stuff about college, but I didn't know anything. I was just like, man, what are these? And it could almost be shameful. But it was in that year I encountered God one-on-one. It was in that year I read my Bible cover to cover 2 times. I've never done it again after that, 2 times in a year, because after then and now I say speed is good, divine direction is better. When the Bible says in Psalm 23, it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not. It says, he maketh me to lie down. When you make someone to do something, it's almost as if you are compelling them. You are forcing them. He makes me. I said, normally sheep like green pastures. So why does the sheep say he makes me, he forces me to lie down in green pastures? One of the things God shared with me in that season was, to the sheep, you can't see that it's green pastures. You think it's thorns. You think it's swamp. But God, who knows the end from the beginning, knows that that's green pastures for you. So he will make you to lie down there. So that season of unemployment, that season when you are waiting on God for a life partner, that season where it seems as if things are going so bad, when you are waiting for your approval of your green card and you are your OPT or something, God will make you to lie down there so that you can get the lessons from there and you can be a blessing to your generation. It was in that season of that 1 year of waiting on God for me to enter college that was the foundation for everything I'm doing in life and ministry today. So to others, it might have seemed as if it was, wow, 1 year of waiting. But to God, it was 1 year of investing in me. So you might not be able to control whatever you come, but you can control how you respond to it. See everything working together for your good. And always ask God, what season of life am I in? What are you trying to teach me in this season? Maybe you're waiting on God for a life partner, waiting on God for a child, waiting on God for something. Always use that season to press into God so that God can breathe in you afresh and you become a better person out of it. I don't know if, but that's one particular season in my life that I think really was pivotal to who I am today.
Yes, that's very beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing, sir. I'm sure there are quite a few of us on the call that are going through different seasons of waiting, different seasons of redirection, maybe graduating from school, going back to school, getting a new job, changing careers. And from what Pastor has said, don't take for granted the season where things are looking slow or things don't seem to be going according to plan, because God is pruning, God is developing you for where He's taking you. Thank you for sharing, sir. Deacon Demi, you mentioned how it's important to do research before investing in something. You said never invest in what you don't know about. I think that's solid investment advice. Could you please share with us what are some things we should look out for when we're researching a suitable company to invest in? What's an indicator of a good investment?
Yeah, that's a good question. What are the indicators of a good investment? I would say for me, when I invest, I personally, I try to invest in things, and this is specifically in the stock market. I try to invest in things that I'm not going to be worried about, things that I'm not going to be checking every single day, right? Things, which means that one, I understand them, and two, I really believe in the long-term prospects, right, of those companies. I tend to invest in things that I never want to sell, things that I want to hold, forever and pass down to the next generation. So that tends to be my philosophy because I'm not a trader, right? I'm not a day trader. I'm not on apps every single day, trading things up and down, right? So some people do that and it works for them, but this is just, my own approach because I just don't have the time to, look at things every single day. And so I look for very, very stable companies, that have a long-term history of one, like growth, and two, like generating profits. And so a lot of the companies I invest in will be some of the bigger companies we're aware of, companies like Apple, companies like Google, companies. Usually, most of the things I invest in are in technology, so they tend to be just companies that I believe are very safe investments. I'm not taking, some large amounts of risk, right, by going behind those names. So, yeah, so the things I look for really are just around what's the history of the company, right? And have they been able to successfully generate growth and profits over time? And, over time, have they been a stable investment, or has it been more volatile? If something's more volatile, then I might stay away from it because I don't have the time to pick, whether it's at the lowest point and now it's going to go up, or whether it's at the highest point and now it's going to go down. So I try to pick things that, are very, stable from that standpoint. What does that mean practically? Practically, that means that a lot of times I invest in companies that sell to other businesses, because businesses are less fickle than consumers. So I like to invest in, Salesforce. Salesforce is like a company that builds a CRM and they sell that CRM to other companies. But I don't like to invest in Snapchat, because if the Gen Zs decide they don't like Snapchat anymore, that's the end of, the Snapchat stock. So I try to invest in things that, are lower risk and not as fickle, right, in terms of when they're in favor or when they're out of favor. So those are just some of the things that I look at, I think about when I'm, going into an investment.
Yeah, those are very great tips. And from what I gather, Dikandemi is a risk-averse investor. He loves the stable returns and, what can be guaranteed. So for anyone who is a little bit more adventurous and has a lot more cash to burn, there would be a different strategy you'll take. But that sounds like some solid advice, especially for someone who is just starting off with investments. All right. Before we move to the guest speaker, does anyone have any questions they would like to ask? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Did have a question.
I have a question for the guest speaker.
Okay, please go ahead, Brother Osborne. I think I heard Sister Michelle.
Okay. So my question is, what is the best investment in God can a youth or a couple make? One or two best investment that they can make these days? I know that we like to make money, but you are sure that if you make these two investments, there's return, there's guarantee, spiritually and financially? That's my question.
Okay, let me talk personally for myself, right? And I'll call it number one, just spiritual investment. And when I say spiritual investment, because you can't control what you come against in life, but you can control how you can respond to it, right? Control your relationship with God. A lot of us have collective relationship with God. So we enjoy praying in morning prayer, prayer lines, Zoom meeting like this. But some of you don't have a personal time. You can't spend 15 minutes with God, you'll have slept off. So some of you, when you are tired and you can't sleep, you have done everything to sleep, you can't sleep. You open your Bible, within 10 minutes, you have slept already. So your Bible is your sleeping pill, right? But have you, the first investment I would say, building that personal relationship with God, moving from the place of the Lord is our shepherd to the Lord is my shepherd. Where you can get to the place of I hear the voice of my sheep hear my voice and they recognize it. Where you can labor in the place of that. He said, this book of the Lord. Did he say this book of the Lord shall not depart out of our mouths? He said, no, out of my mouth. Right? Where you can have a personal relationship. So that it's very, very important. It will keep you in the long run. Your ability to hear from God in terms of, that still small voice, that, that audible instruction, even when a lot of people are speaking to know that this is God speaking to me. That's about then. Number two, personal investments in our lives. How can I be the best version of myself? If I ask you how many books have you read this year, you'll be surprised, right? Some of the things that Dikandemi was sharing, I know a lot of them. I do them, right? I'm an investor, so I even do real estate investments. I almost got to one or two. I also learned one or two things the hard way because as the interest rates went higher, it's reduced how people were buying, and I had like 3 properties in the market. Right. So those are things that, so personal development, personal investment. Go for seminars, go for trainings, right? Go for seminars, go for trainings, read books. The quality of friends that you have to be intentional about the people who are speaking to you and speaking into your life on a daily. Right, that's people you need to weed. Like I said when I was talking, that's people you need to weed out of your life, and the people that you know that okay, these people have gone ahead of me. There are people I spend time with on a quarterly basis, right? Because they are like coaches to me, and there are people I also do that too, both on a quarterly or monthly basis. Have sessions with them, right? And these are very, very because you have to just review who are your personal life. Who are the people? What are the access to growth I have? Right, life without growth is miserable. Right. So read books, go for courses, attend seminars, have the right people around you, have coaches, have mentors, and also pour back to people who are coming behind you. And this has nothing to do with age. You can have a mentor who is far younger than you because they know an area of life that they are more, astute than you in those areas of life. So apart from the spiritual investment in yourself, because that's the anchor of your soul, personal investment to make sure that you are a better person today than you were maybe last month or last year. So I don't know if I answered your questions. So even go for marriage courses. We have marriage retreats we have in our church where we have couples hangouts where people share from, because experience is the best teacher, but it might not be your own experience. You can learn from other people's experience. You will have, there's a lot of things that just I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir. Michelle, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I did have a question for Dick and Demi. From what he said that he was a more risk-averse investor, but I've seen things that have said, like high risk, high reward. So from that viewpoint, what is it worth it to, take the risk once in a while? And when taking those investment risks, how are you able to kind of decipher what is worth taking the risk and what isn't?
Yep, so that's a good question. So yes, yeah, that tends to be that's like the common saying, right? The way like a risky investment pays for itself is the reward. And in investing, I mean, another way to say that is like if you're going to take high risk on something, then there has to be a probability of an outsized, return. But the probability of that outsized return may be low. So, let's say if somebody invests in startups. Startups are actually a great example, and I actually know startups. So, in startups, the probability of a high return is very high. Sorry, the probability of you can get a high return from investing in startups, but the probability is low. So out of every 10 startups you invest in, one may work and the others you might get nothing back, right? So this is just a way for you to kind of like think about, risk and whether or not something is worth it. I think it fundamentally comes down to one, are you willing to lose money, right, on a high risk investment? Because a lot of these high risk things, you may lose a portion of your capital or you may lose all of it. As well too. But sometimes you might make, money as well. So you have to be comfortable with that concept of, every 10 times I take a risk, I may lose money 9 times, but, one time I might actually make money and that might make up for all the losses. So you got to think about like what kind of investor, are you, and do you have that temperament where you're comfortable losing money? I'll give you another example. I know I said I don't like investing in Snap or Snapchat because it's just subject to the whims of of consumers that I don't really understand. But sometimes I might invest in something. For example, I recently invested in Facebook like a few months ago. Previously, I would never invest in Facebook because it's just a business model that I don't fully understand. But the reason I did was because, the price of Facebook had dropped so low, and I had an intuitive understanding that this is below the actual value of the company. So I may take a high risk. I may invest in a high risk opportunity if the price of that opportunity has dropped to a level where I feel like my return is more guaranteed. If that makes sense. So in general, I try to manage my risk and invest in things that are more sure. But then if something that is high risk becomes cheap, because, for example, in the case of Facebook, what happened was that the CEO mentioned that they were not going to make as much profits because they're investing in AI for the next year or 2 years. As a result, the public markets cut Facebook's price by 20%. The price of the stock dropped by 20%. Me, on the other hand, I'm a long-term investor. So I said, okay, great. Now Facebook is 20% cheaper. And I plan to hold Facebook for a very long time. So I'll be here when Facebook starts to generate profits again. So I took that opportunity to invest in Facebook because the price had dropped to a level where it was cheap enough. And then I felt that eventually, in the next year, 2 years, whatever the time might be, the stock would recover. So, that's how I think about kind of investing in things that are higher risk, is waiting for opportunities where the price comes down to a level that I'm comfortable, invested in, and I feel like a return is more, guaranteed. I think I forgot your question, but essentially that's kind of those are some of the things I do when it comes to looking at riskier, assets. Otherwise, if I feel like the price is if I feel like the price is still too high, then I'm not really gonna, if there's no like catalyst, if there's no trigger, if something doesn't change, then, I wouldn't necessarily go into something that's, higher risk. But yeah, essentially don't, if you're putting money into something that's high risk, be comfortable with the fact that you may lose some or all of your capital. And I've lost 100% of my investment in some things. So this is not theoretical. Like I've actually lost 100% of my investment before. And yeah, secondly, look for opportunities where maybe the price of a high risk investment has come down to a level where you're less likely to lose money on it.
All right. Thank you, Dikandemi. We'll take the final audience question from Mr. Wolisi. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I actually want regarding investment. I know investment has to do with time, and so for some of us, we don't have the luxury of time, because when you choose investment, you also have to look for somebody who is looking at a longer time. You have to look at your age and the time you need to wait for it. But is there any investment that we can do that will generate steady income, like every month, apart from the banking fixed deposit, but that that every month you can generate income from it? If you put this money, that will serve as a generating income for us. That's what I want to ask. Because we don't have the luxury of time to wait.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I'll answer that question in a few ways. I think, when you, depending on where you work and things like that, when you look at your budget, and this is something I did for my brother, right? So you think about, okay, what are my expenses? But then you also need to save for retirement. And a lot of employers have like some kind of retirement, savings fund. So you can actually put money into those retirement funds, and when you retire, then you'll be able to withdraw on those funds. So it's not going to give you income today because today you're still working, but then, down the line when you're retired, those funds will then be available to you, for you to have access to. And the reason I talk about that is because you talked about, not having as much time, quote unquote. There are not really any quick fixes, when it comes to, investing in a manner that is, responsible. And so I think the best approach would be to actually put money away for retirement, so that when the retirement does come around, there are savings that can help that individual or help you, get through that retirement period. Then if you're interested in more current income, like today, now there's certain categories of stocks, right, that people call dividend stocks. And, dividend stocks, they pay a regular dividend, maybe on a quarterly basis or an annual basis or semi-annual, depending on the company and their structure. And so, those are companies where, because you own a share of that particular company, every quarter there's a certain dividend that they give back to you, because of your ownership. But even that is not going to be income that someone can live off of, because a lot of the times the dividends are going to be like, 20 cents per share or something. So to really live off of that kind of dividend income, you need to put in like hundreds of thousands, right? Because when you put in hundreds of thousands, you own enough shares, and 10 cents per share or 20 cents per share becomes something more meaningful. So I think if you're thinking about retirement, I think the best thing is actually to invest in a retirement fund like a 401k or something along those lines, because then the capital will be available when you retire. But if you're interested in exploring dividend stocks, like that's another approach to also supplement income today, but also even in retirement as well.
I think in this case, Brother Awolesi is blessed because the person giving the lecture and him, they are in the same parish at Jesus Fort. And I know that Brother Awolesi's situation and question is peculiar. So you will be able to meet each other and give the details. And we will have to ensure that the Kindemi doesn't send you a bill for the professional advice. Okay. So.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All right. So final questions for each of our speakers. We're very far beyond the time. Dikindemi, can you please touch briefly on the difference between traditional savings accounts and high yield savings accounts, and your recommendations on, which is better, how much should be kept there? There's narratives about maybe you should keep 3 times your monthly salary. Some say 3 times your monthly expenses. What are your thoughts on savings and the different types of accounts available?
Yeah, this is a good one. So I bank with, my main bank is Bank of America, and Bank of America is very frustrating because the savings account in Bank of America, yields maybe 0.1% or something like that. Meanwhile, the interest rate set by the central bank of the country is, relatively high. I think maybe it's still like the 3, 4, 5%. So anyways, I don't want to digress too much, but there are the biggest banks in the country tend to have very, very low, like ridiculously low, savings interest rates, even in times where the central bank rate is high. However, there are other banks, some people call them neobanks or digital banks or fintechs, and they tend to actually increase their interest rates as the central bank also increases the national rate, if you will. So I use one called, this is not financial advice, but I use one called Wealthfront, which, they increase and decrease the interest rate, with the central bank as well. And so that's what I do because, it's the stuff that you get from Bank of America is just not, reasonable, and it's not in line with, where the central bank is setting things. So, and that is just a normal savings account, but it's just, they match the savings rates to a certain degree that, the central bank also offers. And so that money is available. I can still take that money out any day, anytime. I can transfer it to Bank of America. I can do whatever I want with it. So it's not even locked up. It's just a savings account that, matches the central rates. But then there's also things like CDs, right? Certificates of deposit, or fixed deposit that banks offer. But the issue with those is the money is locked up, right? And you can't access the money for the period of that fixed deposit, which, it can be 3 months or 6 months, 1 year, and on and on. So a little bit of research is required, right, to figure out, what are the rates across different types of savings accounts. The other thing you want to look at is the money accessible, right? So ideally, the money is as accessible as possible without you having to pay a penalty. Or if you're fine locking up the money, then, that also works. So those would be the 2 factors that I look into. And then the third thing, if you're going to go with a non-traditional bank, like a digital bank or, someone like that, you want to make sure that the bank is, that digital bank is backed by like a traditional bank underlying it. So for example, Wealthfront that I use, underlying Wealthfront is a bank called Green Dot Bank, which is like a bank, I think, in Utah. So typically like these technology, like fintechs, will have some kind of traditional bank underneath them. And then the other thing you want to look for is there's something called like FDIC, which basically like insures your bank accounts up to a certain dollar amount. I think the typical FDIC amount is 250,000. And so, if an account is FDIC insured, then you can be more comfortable, depositing your money even with like a non-traditional bank. And then, there's no limit to the number of banks you can use, right? So if you're very risk averse and you're like, well, I have $1 million, I want to put it into these high yield accounts, but I don't want to go over the FDIC limit. You can have multiple of these like non-traditional banks and put your money in there up to the limit. And that way your capital is like always, protected, regardless of, the fact that you're using maybe non-traditional, banks to save your money and get access to those, access to the higher interest. But as always, like I said, there's many considerations. Tax. So even when you make money on savings, you actually get taxed on that money as well too. So that's just something to keep in mind, that the interest income you earn on savings will also be taxed by the government too.
All right, thank you so much, Dick and Demi. Pastor, you mentioned how you were in secondary school in Nigeria, and so I'm assuming that you're an immigrant. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But even with being an immigrant, you've been able to earn so many degrees, you've been able to be successful in different areas, own multiple businesses. You said you're an investor, you're a pastor. How have you been able to get such spiritual success and also material worldly success while balancing, family life, your relationship with God, and every other thing you're doing in life? What are your recommendations or advice for people who have immigrated to the country and trying to find success as well?
Okay, let me start from 3 John 2. 3 John 2 says, Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospered. So we're talking of all-round prosperity now. We have to get to a level where in every area of our lives, we are operating at the very best position that God expects us to. Right. I'll give you an example. Even up until last week, I just registered for swimming classes. I did not know how to swim. My wife could swim, my children could swim. I said, I'm enrolling. We'll take up this class. After that, I want to learn an instrument. When like I said, investing in yourself because all you've got. You're not somebody else. So beyond that, it's about having a vision. What kind of person do I want to be in the next 5 years? When you have a mental picture of where you think you want to be, a vision for your family, vision for every year we have personal retreats and family retreats where we break those items down, both personal development, family, career, our health, what kind of food we want to eat. So as of July, when we're reviewing half year, I've added a little more weight. So what are the plans to reduce those, to share those weight a little bit? We outline some of those things there. Register at the gym, this and that, not eat at this. So it's about setting goals, having a vision about where you want to be. Setting goals. Goals are most, especially if they're smart goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound, put those things there. How do I want to achieve this? How do I read? So you start with them, but you also have accountability. My wife is my accountability partner on many fronts. Sometimes you say, once start reading a book, the first week you do, the second week, by the third week, you're already falling short of it, right? So how can you do those things? And so in those ways, when you have those goals, put those goals in front of you. I want to write a book. I'm an author also. I want to also write more books. And we only have 24 hours to attain all these things, right? So write those goals down there, put them in places that you can see them, review them from time to time. Have an accountability partner. Now a lot of people have coaches, right? You said, and the last session, you say you want to do this in the last meeting. How far have you gone with that? And by that way, you're not just having wishes and desires. You have goals that you can run with. You have tasks that you can run with, and you are better for it. And beyond that, it's just a personal quest to be the best version of myself, right? So you have to trust God for increased capacity, so that the other day my children started game night every Friday. Well, now the time is not enough. They want to start doing game night, but I desired it so that it will help our bonding with them. Because I also want to be not to be a good husband, I want to be a good father. I had to create time to do it, right? So wherever your heart is, you put time there, and I want to implore us as men and women, as gentlemen, gentle ladies on this call, don't just be a good career person and be a failure when it comes to be a father, right? Don't just be a good Christian. You're heavily cautious, but you're not earthly relevant. So they are speaking and you're thinking, can I bring John chapter 3, verse 16? That's what you can have there. No, you're diverse. Read books. I don't really spend much time watching TV. Right, I'm the show, man. So how you watch those? Someone you watch season 1, season 2, season 3, season 4, and you're low. That time, I must say I don't spend time watch. I can watch maybe, but anything that is prolonged, I don't listen to the radio. Right, I'd rather just listen to something that will edify me because there's not so much on the news. So it's about knowing what works for you, the season of life where you are in, what's competing with your time, prioritizing skill of preference, developing yourself. And it's so many things, but having that vision of who you want to be and how you can attain it. So let me stop there because I know time is gone, and everyone, thank you so much for let me just give an outro now. I want to appreciate everyone for being here. I want to appreciate, thank you so much, Daddy Amome Tegbade. We celebrate you greatly. We love you. Thank you, everyone who has been on this call. I'm sure you can reach everywhere. My social media handles are my name, just Femi Enigbokan on Instagram. I like my family, so you still love family there. I like Jesus, you still love Jesus there. I like to enjoy myself, you still love that there. Also, Femi Enigbokan on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all. Feel free to, if you need my details, I'm sure you can just send me a DM. I will do that. Thank you so much for the privilege. I don't take this for granted. Lord, honor you, greatness.
Amen. Thank you so much, sir. Can we give a round of applause, reactions, in person for our honorable speakers, Pastor Femi Enigbokan, Deacon Demilade, Obayomi. Thank you so much, sirs, for joining us. God bless you. And I'm sure we've all been richly blessed.